It's Saturday the 19th of October and tomorrow is the 20th of October. 20th October 2010, I was involved in a media, what you could call a snowball, as a single mum with a disability trapped in the benefit system. My name is Kellie Cottam, and on the 13th of December 2012, 2 of my 4 children were unlawfully taken by social services in what I call an abduction. It's even classed as a kidnapping. They were taken on a false allegation. They lied to get a court order, and they threw me into a 6-month process where my family were persistently abused and I was gagged, which is basically an injunction that stops me from being able to see my children or speak about my children. On the 28th of October of this year, I will be in the Royal Courts of Justice for a committal to prison. That means that I potentially could go to prison for 2 years for speaking of my children and speaking of my case. My children have already been involved in a media. My children have already been named. They were named in the news articles, and if anybody wants to go onto Google and Google my name, they'll see a story that went out in what was called the Chorley Guardian, which is my local paper. It was a front page, and the article basically just has a picture of me and my children, and it's Benefit Britain. The story is positive. The story is about change. The story is of the benefit system and how fragmented and how people were getting caught into traps. I went up with George Osborne on the day that they released the changes that were coming in, and on the 28th of October, while I am in court, is the day that the universal credits will be rolling out. The pilot has already been done. My concern is there is a massive big gap between prosperity and poverty in this country. And the reason that I did the media was because they were making changes again that was going to push me further into a trap. And it's a trap that I didn't want to be in. I never chose to be in the benefit system. I didn't wake up and say, hey, you know, my passion and dream is to be on benefits and live on a really low income. People seem to think that when you're on benefits, it's like, yeah, this is really good. You know, it's just 1% of an income. If you could have a few pounds over a few million, I think you would choose to have financial prosperity and not to be in poverty. Nobody chooses to be in the benefit system. I came into the benefit system because of my medical health. The condition that I have is called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it would be a good idea if maybe, again, you Google this and you have a look at what it is. If anybody watches Coronation Street, Izzy, who's in the wheelchair, has the same condition as me. It basically means that I don't reproduce collagen, and if you can see here, I've got many kids' names on my hand, but if you can see here, watch my knuckles move, watch my thumb, or my fingers. Every joint in my body, the ligaments around it are so loose, and it means that I would sublux or dislocate each joint. I have quite a lot of problems with my hips and my back, my knees. But as a child, I was always very active. I played competitively at netball. I was involved in martial arts. I was a dancer, and I was always involved in activities. When I was about 11, my parents separated. It's actually my dad and my ex-stepmom. I had a very, very grounded life. I lived with my dad and my stepmom, and I visited my mum every other weekend. Life's great. I was going through you could call it sexual abuse. I could just say that I wasn't a virgin, and I wasn't a virgin for a very young age. You can call it rape, you can call it assault, but people have got different classifications because this person was just as innocent as I was. He wasn't that much older than me, and from about the ages of 7, I obviously didn't have what you would class as my innocence. I was getting to an age where I didn't want this going on. I was starting to learn that it wasn't the way life should be. At school, we'd just watched a Just Say No video, and I broke down to the headmistress and told her that this was what was going on in my life, and they pulled the police in. Now, because I was always whinging about my knees, I was always whinging about my stomach. Not necessarily whinging, I just wanted my parents to listen to me and help me fix it. I was very, very active. I wanted to do well in netball. I wanted to do well in athletics. I competed at a high level for athletics because I was not just I represented the school, I also represented the county, and I'm one of those people who likes to do really well at everything that I do, and if there's something holding me back, I like to repair that. And I was at the point with netball when I would be taking a shot and my shoulders were playing up, or my hands and was sort of like messing around. I can do some really funky things with my fingers and stuff. So it's not in my head. What you actually see is very physical, it's very real. Now, when I was pulled in front of the police, because stuff had been going on for so long, I was seen as an attention seeker. Because my parents were going through a divorce and I was an 11-year-old child, people thought that, I was basically trying to get attention. My mum at the time couldn't accept that what I was saying was the truth, and the police decided to shut the case. Now, that's all well and good for them. But as an 11-year-old child, I've then got to live with what I'm trying to speak out. And in this country, the Children's Act, is becoming quite apparent that children don't have a voice. When children speak out about stuff, people don't listen. And the Children's Act was brought together in 1989. And in my sort of understanding, that was at a time when children should be seen and not heard. Sexual abuse wasn't something that you talked about. Mental health wasn't something that you talked about. Even divorce was a very dirty, forbidden thing. I grew up in an environment where my mum fell pregnant at 15, and she would have been like one of the first sort of societal sort of stigmas, I suppose, where she actually had me and sort of brought me into the world. A matter of years before that, if a young person sort of got pregnant, then they would, be raised up by family, they'd be taken to convents, and children would be put up for what we know now as forced adoption. Now, for me, that wasn't the case, and I was raised by my mum. If social services were coming into somebody's environment back then when I was born, the likelihood is, as a 15-year-old, my mum wouldn't be allowed to have raised me. Now, thank God that they weren't under social services, and my nan was around, and my nan was adamant that if my mum couldn't have me, she would. In fact, when I was 3, my nan actually applied to adopt me. My mum wasn't coping very well, and she was very, very young, and she didn't actually want to be a mum. She just wanted to go to law school. She was very, very academic, very bright, very clever. Having a child was a complete and utter accident. But that's not my fault. I didn't decide, well, I might do if you're spiritual, I might have decided to come into the world. But my mum and dad basically did something that brought me into the world. And as a child, I have a right to have the best quality life that I can. And under the circumstances that they had, my mum was very young, my dad was very young, and so much respect for my dad because, he wasn't educated and he went to work every day. He never left me. He stayed with me every day, and, he raised me, but he did eventually bring me up with my stepmom. Very stable, or what they consider stable, but a lot of people wouldn't call stable because going off to your mum's every other weekend is not the way things are meant to be. But for me, I don't look at it that way, and it's amazing. Now, not that my mum was like multiple boyfriends, but during that path, she did have a few very significant partners in my life who, for me, had added so much great value to me. I haven't lived in one world. I haven't just lived in, like, some people live in council and that's where they live and that's where they stay. Some may go into sort of what we consider societal sort of statuses. So, you would be of middle class or lower class or upper class. Now, what's actually happening in what I see is this middle class bracket is gradually falling to pieces. Self-employment is being under attack, and people are falling, further and further below what the law defines as a threshold for the way that children should be living. Now, there isn't a rule book. Nobody ever sort of gave birth and went, here's a rule book. We've got a good idea of what you should be doing up until the age of 5. Many people start maternity classes, and you can sort of like get a good idea of what you're doing with a child, but there's no standard rule. Now, there actually is, and it's called the Child Protection. No, it's not called. It's called the Children's Act of 1998. You're gonna have to Google it. Google it. I'm learning too, but it's the Children's Act of 1989, and it was slightly edited for the adoption law in 2004. Now, in about a week's time, I'm gonna have to know this Children's Act inside and out. And basically, it sets down how a child should be living. Now, personally, I say that it's not relevant to 2013. Society is very different. We live in a very different world. We are in a technology world. We are in an internet world. Social media is a massive big boom. And that's just the way the world is. It's advanced and technology is expanding. And we're in a really, really great time in this country. In the world, really. But unfortunately, polarity exists, and where there's up, there's down, there's in, out, there's hot, cold. Now, that means that good's happening and bad's happening. Now, I came into the social care system in and out as a child. Recently, I've had the opportunity to look at my own paperwork, and I would advise any person, I'm going to get some websites up and running, and I'm going to put a few things up for people to be able to have a look at and how you're able to do stuff. But I'd advise any person to access whatever data is kept against them at the moment and get as much stuff as you can and have a look at it and see what maybe needs to be edited. There's information kept on you that you're not aware of, or maybe don't know what's going on. Now, with me, this has made my life really difficult because of being labelled a liar, attention seeker and manipulator. It's meant that my medical condition has come under some form of discrepancy. Whenever anyone accesses any paperwork on me, then obviously therefore it lays that Kellie Cottam or Kellie Avis is a liar, attention seeker and manipulator. Great, freaking labelled, mate. But that it's very difficult for somebody with a hidden disability. So somebody who sees me